Recording in progress.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Hartford Charter Revision Commission to order on Thursday, February 17th, 2022. And we will proceed with the roll call, and I will ask David Grant to call the roll.
Great. So when I say your name, just please say here for the record. James Wolfe.
Here.
Raul De Jesus Jr.
Here.
John Gale. Alexander Aponte.
Here.
Arunan Aralumpalum. Steve Bonafonte. Vicky Gallen Clark. Kamora Harrington.
Here.
Kenneth Kennedy. Kathleen Kowalshin. Melvin Medina. Jadira Rivera. Bruce Rubenstein.
Here.
And Eon Smith.
Here.
And David, we had Commissioner Bonafonte join us as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that we were short one, so you should have quorum now.
Okay, thank you, David. All right, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from January 20th and February 3rd. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we have Councilman Gale, who's also commissioner of this commission, who's joined us as well to add to the attendance. And so I'd like to entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from January 20th and February 3rd with one small note that for the January 20th minutes, to acknowledge that there was no discussion on the motion to approve the December 16th and January 11th meeting minutes. But other than that, there should not be any additional changes. So I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. So moved.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it and the motion carries. We'll move on to item number 3, Chairman's report. Per usual with my report, we're continuing to monitor the situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're looking forward to coming back to meeting with hybrid meetings, hopefully in March. So stay tuned for that and more information. We'll keep everyone updated with that. On to item number 4, public comment. Do we have any members of the public on the call this evening? Does not look like it. And seeing none, we will move on to item number 5, comments from members of the Court of Common Council. So at our last meeting, we had a number of members from the Hartford City Council offer their perspective on changes they'd like to see made to the charter and Chapter 4 of the charter, specifically with regards to administrative and professional structural issues, procedures with regards to budget issues. And
I went to a Ukrainian Greek.
And then the potential for districts here in Hartford or and changes to the composition of the Court of Common Council. So this evening we have Councilwoman Rosado and Councilwoman Surgeon with us to offer their perspectives. And we will go in alphabetical order as we did at our last meeting, and we will kick it over to Council President Rosado. Council President, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Wolfe, and thank you to the members of our panel and our commissioners, which have been doing a great job. We learned so much about charter revision, going actually through the charter. And to Steve Magnick, thank you so much for the amazing job that that you're doing working with us, council, in collaboration to move this charter revision. I do have an ask, and I don't know how Councilwoman Shirley Sturgeon feels about this, but I am waiting on 2 other councilmen to come on. So I would respectfully ask the chair to see if we could have the presentation from all of the towns and then move the agenda back for council members to weigh in, because I was really looking forward to see how the hybrid model, the at-large, does work in all of the other towns. So I don't know how you all feel about that.
I have no objection to that, and I don't think our guests have any objection to moving up and possibly getting off this call a little earlier tonight. So that's no problem at all. We will move on then to item number 6, which is the panel discussion, the review of the Court of Common Council. And so what I'll do this evening is I'll kick it over to Steve Mednick, who so graciously put together this panel discussion. I'll let him make the introductions, and then we'll start. We'll go through the panelists one by one. Each panelist can make their presentation. We'll open it up for questions from the commissioners afterwards, and I will guide that process. So, Steve, thanks again for putting this together, and please proceed with the introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam President Rosado. It's great to see you and the other members of the council. I'm really honored to have the 6 speakers that we have here tonight, some of whom I've known for many, many years, others who I've met in this process and hope to get to know over the course of the years to come. What I tried to do with this panel for purposes of the Charter Commission was to give you kind of a representative sample of the different types of government that different kinds of council structures that we have in the state of Connecticut among the larger cities. Obviously, you're not going to have any RTM people here, town meeting people here, and there's no one here who represents a town that doesn't have a charter. So I have several communities where we're going to talk about the hybrid system, which the president is interested in. We have a pure district system in Waterbury, in New Haven. Al Lucas will be here to talk about that. We have an at-large system, which you guys are very familiar with, in Middletown, and I think it'll be interesting to hear. A year ago, the majority leader, Nacera, and I worked on the Middletown charter, and they made a decision to remain where they were after going through a very similar process. So it'll be interesting to hear his perspective. So, and of course, Danbury has a hybrid system as well. Waterbury has a district system, but it's an interesting district system that Paul Pernaruski will talk about in a minute. So I'm going to move around through the panel. I'm going to start off with probably the person I've known the longest in this process, Al Lucas, who's the only non-elected official here. I hope the elected officials don't mind if I start with a non-elected official. Al's been with the New Haven Board of Alders since the time I served on the board when I was a child. At the age of 29 to 39, Al came on as a very young man.
You were never a child.
There you go. That's probably true. I used to wear 3-piece suits in 8th grade. You're absolutely right. Al started off in the Office of Legislative Services, has been the director for a long time. And what I want him to talk about, obviously, is the district system in New Haven, as well as a legislative body that has a full-time professional legislative staff. So we'll start with Al, and it's my pleasure. I see him somewhere here. It's my pleasure to introduce Al Lucas to all of you. Al, are you there?
I am. Thank you.
Oh, there he is.
Yep.
Okay.
Can you hear? Yeah. Thank you all, and it is a pleasure to be with you this evening. Yes, I did change Steve's diapers, and and he's done
That's
work
not a pretty
for the
picture,
Al. But it's our honor on behalf of our president, Taisha Walker-Myers, and the New Haven Board of Alders. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to help you all as you work through this process. We'll be going through the same process soon, so expect us to be reciprocating in the request when the time comes. As Attorney Mednick mentioned, the New Haven Board of Alders is made up of all wards, called wards down here. There are 30 individual wards. Each one is elected in that particular area. So right now, every alder represents a little over 4,000 people. It has been that way in New Haven for the foreseeable past, at least for the last 2 centuries, and we've had as many as 33. We've gone as high as 33, and as low as 27 in the last 50 years. Right now we're at 30, which seems to be where we have been. Back in 1972, thereabouts, the Board of Alders decided that it needed its own staff, given that the executive side had the whole executive team working for them. The legislative side thought it would be appropriate for them to have their own individual staff that works for them. Our office, Office of Legislative Services, is a centralized staff. We don't work for any individual alders. Our staff works for the whole board. So regardless of party affiliation, seniority on the board, etc., we work for the full board. We have a staff of 10. 9 members are civil service appointees. They're tested and interviewed to join on. And then the director, the role that I hold, is appointed by the leadership of the board to 4-year terms. To Steve's point, this will be my 5th 4-year term. So I've been here for a little while. The way we set up our staff is that we have what I call 3 different silos. We have a committee silo. So we have 3 of our staff people that are specifically dedicated to doing all the work related to the committees, setting up the committees, setting up the meetings, making sure the right people attend the meetings, and writing memos for the members of the committees so that they're briefed ahead of time on what the issues are related to those items that will come up at that committee meeting. That's our committee silo. Then we have our legislative assistance group, which is our constituent service group. So we have 3 people dedicated to that. Each one is assigned to 10 of the alders, and they do all of the constituent service work for the alders. If a tree falls on your car and you need your alder to intercede, the alder would direct them to call their staff person, who would then follow up and make sure that the constituents' issues are taken care of. Same thing if they need to meet with a city department head or a neighborhood activist or a corporate citizen, however it was, they would set up those meetings for them. They draft their newsletters. They do the initial research for any legislation that alder might be interested in. They'll reach out and do all the initial research on that, and then provide what they found to the member to decide if they want to take it forward. So those are some of the things that they might do. They'll do anything non-political. So if there's a groundbreaking or a new school opening, they might write your opening remarks for that as well. And then we have our administrative support silo. So the 3 people in that. One is our receptionist, admin person, we call it admin records coordinator, keeps all the correspondence records, attendance records, etc., anything that the public might be interested in, and serves as that person that answers all the initial inquiries that might come in. And then we have a person that we have dedicated to transcribing the Board of Alders proceedings, as well as doing congratulatory and condolence citations. We call them citations, but most places will call them proclamations. So we have a person dedicated to that. So if someone has a significant birthday or someone sadly has lost someone, we have someone dedicated to be able to write out those citations for them. And then we have our journal person who puts together, our legislative records coordinator who puts together our journal, as well as track the legislation from the time it comes in until the time it leaves for the mayor's signature and filing in the clerk's office. So that's the setup we've had. We've had that set up for the last 40 or so years. It seems to work really, really well for us. It gives the legislative body a little more heft in terms of being able to be prepared to analyze those things presented by the executive or by outside entities that might be submitting things like development plans or a zoning request, to have some subject matter experts available that are specifically assigned to staff for the board or the council, and only that. So I'll stop there, Mr. Mednick. I think I've taken up enough time, and if I'll be here if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. The second speaker tonight is, we probably could have done this together. We don't live far apart in Hamden, Connecticut. Is one of my bosses. I serve as the counsel to the Legislative Council of Hamden, which has been a great honor for the last 6 or 7 years. And Dominique Baez is the third president I've had the pleasure and honor to work with. And it's my pleasure to introduce the president of the Hamden Legislative Council to talk about the hybrid system and how we do things in Hamden. Dominique.
An honor to work with you, Attorney Mednick, and thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Dominique Baez. I'm new to the position as a president here in Hamden, but this is my second term as a councilwoman. I am a councilwoman at large. We have a hybrid system, which means that we have 9 districts with representatives, councilpersons from those 9 districts, as well as 6 at-large persons. So each district, their residents get to elect their district representative, as well as they put on their ballot 4 names for their at-large positions. And in the end, there are 6 at-large people and 9 districts. This hybrid situation works for Hamden. I'm unsure of how many years we've been doing this, but it's as long as I can remember back. And I think it assists residents well in that there are people who are familiar with the neighborhood, what goes on the individual and neighborly level. And then there are also at-large representatives that have a greater understanding of the entire town and have a responsibility to every residence and townwide issues. And it also works so to represent the entire town and have a bigger view of what's going on, have the neighborhood issue happening. You have people within the districts who understand neighborly issues. And then you also have the district representatives who almost have a partner with them if they have at-large people who are familiar to the issue or live in the area. So, that's a bit of a quick synopsis of what Hamden's hybrid system is. Is there any questions that I should be answering?
I think we're going to hold the questions till then, Madam President, because I think hopefully it'll lead to interesting interchange of ideas between the members of the panel.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, I'm going to go in and out with different systems that we have, is representing my hometown. I was born in Waterbury, Connecticut. And one of the early charter revisions that I did, this particular fellow was the president or the chair of the Charter Commission. That's how we met back in 2002, I believe it was. And he has been for many, many years the president of the Waterbury Board of Aldermen. And Paul Pernaruski has also gone through the system, gone through a transition in Waterbury where they moved from a at-large system to a district system. And so I thought it would be interesting to hear from Paul about the thinking on going to a district system, on the kind of district system they have, and what it was like to go through a transition. So it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Paul Pernaruski from Waterbury.
Thanks, Steve. I think it was actually just about 20 years ago this month that we started that first Charter Revision Commission that we were doing. And I have been on the Board of Aldermen in Waterbury since 2002. So this is my 20th year on the board, and I think it's my 11th or 12th year as the president of the board. As Steve said, when I first came on, the board was a fully at-large board. We have 15 members on our Board of Aldermen. And at that time, under the system we had by the city charter, no more than 9 of the aldermen could be from one party. So we had 9 on the majority party, and we had 6 members who were on the minority party. And until about 2001, Waterbury had gone back and forth really between the two parties on a regular basis, whether the majority was the Republican or the Democratic parties. Since 2001, and I won't go into the details, but we had a very bad year in 2001 with a mayor named Giordano, who has caused some problems, who happened to be a Republican. The majority has been Democratic for the last 20 years. About 6 years ago, there had been, for a number of years in Waterbury, there had been an undercurrent of people who were interested in moving away from the at-large system and going to a district system. The idea being that with an at-large system, you had no one whose sole interest was in the neighborhoods. And in Waterbury, we have relatively 4 sections of town. The city breaks up into that way with some smaller neighborhoods within there. But just for instance, out of 15 aldermen, when I was an alderman, 4 of them lived within a mile of my house. So 1/3 of the Board of Aldermen lived in the area that I live in, which is Bunker Hill. Probably close to another 1/3 lived in Town Plot. So you had 2 neighborhoods that were heavily represented. The rest of the city was underrepresented. The Hispanic section and the African American section actually at that time had nobody from their districts. While we had Hispanic and African American members on the board, they didn't actually live in those districts. So there had been an undercurrent to try to get that done. At one point, the question was actually put on the ballot to change the charter and go to, I think in that case, it was a hybrid system that actually went on the ballot. And when it went to a vote, it failed. So it sort of stayed dormant for a while. Just after 2001, at one point, I think we had the oversight board was in, and they put a non-binding question on as a referendum. And that year it passed, but it was non-binding, so nothing came of it. And it just lay dormant for a little while again. About 7 years ago, we put together a charter commission. And at that point, there was a lot of interest in going to the districts. And that year, the commission actually put forward a proposal to change from an at-large system to a district system. The concern was, at that point, as I said, the Republicans had been the minority party for all of those years. And there was a great concern that if we went to a completely at-large system with 9 districts or 15 districts, 1 member from each district, and no set aside for the minority party, that the city would become dominated by one party. And so the compromise was to create a system where we maintained 15 members. We divided the city into 5 districts, which is how many House districts we have, state House districts. So that aldermanic districts roughly represent the House districts, but not exactly, because our 71st district, which is our first aldermanic district, the state district has an awful lot of Middlebury in it. So our districts are slightly different to get the balance. And out of those 5 districts, we elect 3 aldermen, but under the charter, no more than 2 can be from one party. So when you go to vote for aldermen, you vote for 2 aldermen, and the top 3 vote getters, as long as they're not from the same party, then become the sitting aldermen. The aldermen run on a 2-year term, and at the same time we went to the district system, we changed our mayor to a 4-year term. So the mayor runs every 4 years, the aldermen run every 2 years. The thought was combining districts with a year in which the aldermen don't run with the mayor would make it easier for people to get on the ballot, for people who aren't necessarily heavily political to be able to win office and get a chance to make a difference when we went down that way. So far that hasn't happened. We've had 2 elections now where the mayor was not at the top of the ticket, and in both of those elections, the majority party still won the 10 seats that is the maximum that they can have. And so that's kind of where we are at this point with it.
Thank you, Paul. So you see, it's kind of a quasi, what I call a mini at-large system. You have districts where you are allowed, where you have more than 2 members, you're allowed to have an at-large system. So it's which protects minority party representation rights. The next speaker, one of the other things I do in my life is I am counsel to the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, and two of the members of that council are here tonight, Danbury, which will go next, and then later on Norwalk. And we were graced last year when we were doing the Middletown Charter with former Mayor Mark Boughton to talk about their system. And I've had the pleasure of meeting Vinny DiGilio this last week. So he's the most recent person I have met on this panel, but he's a terrific guy, and he's the president of their council. And I look forward to hearing what he has to say about the hybrid system in Danbury. Vinny.
Yes, thank you, Attorney Mednick. We very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you to the commission for allowing me to be here, and of course, Chairman Wolf. So the Danbury is, in listening to everybody and how it's a little unique, I think we're all just a touch different, but we're a hybrid system where we have 7 wards. Really looks ultimately like a pizza pie, and 7 wards rotate clockwise. Everybody kind of comes together in the middle, not quite at a point, but all right in the middle. And the 7 wards are represented by 2 folks, 2 council people. So that's a total of 14, and then 7 at-large positions for a complete council of 21. Right now, I think when it comes to some structure, I'll get to a part of the structure in a moment, but we also have, so in each caucus, there is in the majority party, there's a majority leader and a majority legislative leader. I would say they kind of act like a manager and assistant manager of the caucus. And then in the minority caucus, there's a minority leader and a minority legislative leader. So those 4 leadership positions combine with the president, and that's a 5-person leadership team. So the president is elected by the entire body of the council. The entire 21-person body elects the president, but then each respective caucus handles their leadership in those 2 positions for a 5-person leadership team. The ward versus at large is we've done it for a very long time. I don't know anything different, but it's definitely not. There's not a hierarchy per se of wards versus at large. I, for instance, have always been a ward person. So I'm in the 2nd ward, and I've always been a ward person. I've been the legislative leader of my caucus, the majority leader of the caucus, and been the president of the council. So there's a lot of support from the other members of the caucus, of course, but I would say that, if anything, I would say the at-large folks don't necessarily get as much of the calls or the complaints or the asks from the constituents, because most people know they have assigned ward folks and they go to them, as opposed to the at-large folks who they don't know where they deal with. So I would say, as a collective, we work together as a group and not necessarily have a hierarchy or a separation where folks represent the entire town versus the neighborhoods, because due to that pie slice structure, it encompasses the whole city. Every ward has comes to the middle, where there would be classified as the downtown, and stretches out to the far lengths of Danbury. So you get within each ward, you do have quite a representation from downtown to the border of the city as a whole. Our leadership and our council as a whole, we have a legislative assistant who reports through the mayor's office, and they're there to support the entire council for administrative types of things and minutes, and ensuring all the recordings are done accurately, and maintain the minutes, coordinate meetings, all of those type of things. And they support the entire 21-person body. The legislative assistant is appointed by the mayor at his pleasure. And so that's our main support role. And of course, we're all volunteer. The legislative assistant's a paid position that's appointed. How we interact with the mayor, I would say we have our city council meetings, of course, on the first Tuesday of every month. We have our respective caucus meetings, closed caucus meetings on the night prior. But before the actual council meeting on Tuesday evenings, we have a leadership meeting with the mayor, where all 5 members of the leadership team, the mayor's office, chief of staff, and anyone else that he deems appropriate comes in, and that's where we go over the agenda. And I lead that meeting for the agenda, and then it turns over to the mayor for filling us in on anything that's necessary. I think I covered everything that I initially wanted to mention. Right now, we are going through a reapportionment commission every 10 years. So that's happening currently, actually, right now at 7 o'clock. It kicked off tonight, their organizational meeting. So in September, we'll be proposed with kind of moving some of those lines according to the population and the census tract. So that's promised to be a lively discussion come the fall. But nonetheless, that's our structure.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor and a pleasure. He brings up an important point for the at-large communities. You don't have to worry about redistricting. It's one of the issues. So if we move toward a district system, we have to create a reapportionment process in the charter. It's not difficult. I've done it in many communities, but it's something you need to know about if we do move toward a district system. It's one additional function that you would have to have performed during the course of the decade, every decade or so. The next speaker is the Majority Leader of the Middletown Common Council. I think I mentioned this earlier. I worked with Jean Nacera very closely in a charter revision a year ago. They just did a significant charter revision that passed in November, where we did address many of the issues of their legislative structure. And I look forward to hearing from Gene and seeing if I remember everything we did. He can ask me tomorrow, but my pleasure to introduce Jean Nacera.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, everyone, for allowing me to say a few words. First, I'd like to say that Middletown, for the first time, sought independent counsel in the process of charter revision, and that's how we connected with Steve. And I can't say enough for that process. In the past, we used staff attorneys to assist in the process, and in hindsight now, what I view is that is a flawed system. You're getting the executive branch side of view on the matter, and that's really important. As you know, everyone on the call tonight knows that you have to have a broad view of all the matters that you're discussing. Middletown is a small city. We're under 50,000 residents. We're a large geographical area. I think we're one of the largest land areas in Connecticut. We have functioned, as several people said tonight, with an at-large system. And that was not on a high issue as we moved into charter revision. We did discuss it at length. There was some concern that we should perhaps look at a ward system. But there were other really important issues that we wanted to address. And I could say with Steve and a great commission, we were successful in doing several things that the community said could never happen. One was the Board of Education was historically solely responsible for supervising and were solely responsible for just the teachers, but in terms of supervision and hiring, The rest of their staff was hired by the city. And of course, that was a tremendous problem for the city and the Board of Ed. So going back to the at-large system, I see it as a loosely coupled system in terms of the 12 council members. And I'm not saying it's disorganized at all, but there's a mix of connections within Middletown. We're not, in fact, the current council is spread out throughout the whole city. The community is tight knit and knows the process, knows how to reach out to the council, and they do. We're a community that works hard at community input, and of course it's been difficult, but I would have to say that's one of our strengths is community input. So the at-large program certainly worked. We're also a community that values a strong mayor system, but we did move to reorganize the council by adding a president, majority leader, and minority leader. In the past, Middletown had a deputy mayor that was appointed by the mayor. That was eliminated in this charter. That was problematic. So it was a very busy, very, very busy, comprehensive review process. I commend the commission and Steve. We accomplished our goals. The at-large versus hybrid was not a priority. What we have in Middletown is working because of history and how we conduct ourselves. And I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. I want to add one point, since I do know something about the Middletown Charter. The other thing they did to strengthen the legislative body is they added a provision that allowed them to independently hire counsel.
Right.
Prior to the charter, they were at the mercy of the administration as to whether they needed outside counsel. They now have the ability to do that, and they also have their clerk under their tutelage as well. I see that Dan Berry, the clerk, the assistant to the council, works for the mayor. That's kind of the way it was in Middletown, although on the practical level, she worked for the council, but really was under the aegis of the mayor's office. Moving forward, that person now works for the council and will be, right now, reports to the majority leader. After the next election, will report to the president. So they did a lot to strengthen their legislative body in this last process.
With your assistance, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is another person I haven't known long. We've had several wonderful conversations in the last couple of weeks. I've been reading about, I think, his ancestors in a wonderful book about the Revolutionary War. Robert Livingston, who was the Chancellor of New York, I believe may have been a distant relative and ancestor of our next speaker. Tom Livingston is the president of another one of the members of the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, Norwalk. He represents a hybrid system. I was also interested during Tom's talk if he addresses this. I saw on the website that there seems to be staff links from the administration to the council committees. They're directly named liaisons to work with each of the council committees. And if Tom could talk about their hybrid system and how it has worked or not worked, that would be great. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Tom Livingston to all of you.
Thank you, Steve. And it's very, very, very distant relations, the Livingstons. But thank you for allowing me to be here. When Steve called me, I thought it was very fortuitous because we are looking at charter revision in Norwalk too. So I find this fascinating and really educational for me as well. I am now in my fourth two-year term as a member of the Norwalk Common Council and my second one-year term as council president. Norwalk, as some of you may know, sixth largest city, population about 90,000. We have a 15-member common council. The 15 members are comprised of 2 from each of 5 districts and 5 at large. I'll spend a moment to talk about that right now. As I look at this, in the operation, there's no distinction in the daily operation of the council. We all have the same vote. We all vote on everything. The way I look at it, and I've had conversations with other members, at-large members, and I think this was mentioned in Danbury. One of I guess the results and consequences of an at-large versus in district is the in-district people get a lot more requests and complaints from the residents. I spoke to somebody today who doesn't get many at all from the citywide, from people generally. It's really the in-district people. And actually, I think it's actually one of the benefits of having the hybrid system is it guarantees that there will be representation in each of our 5 districts. So whereas if it was at large, you can end up with a group of people all from one district, and we actually have a lot of the at-large or a number of the at-large in the same district. This does enable us to get a broader representation, guarantees at least a minimum of 10 people who have different perspectives, and that's really helpful. In terms of how we operate, council meets every 2 weeks. The mayor presides at our meetings. We have a council president, myself. We have a majority leader and a minority leader. The members are paid $50 a month, or translates into $46.17 after taxes. I don't recommend putting that in a charter to pay, but that's it. We operate through 8 standing committees and 2 ad hoc committees. The committees roughly match the city structure. So, for example, we'll have a committee on Parks and Rec, which is staffed by the head of the Parks and Rec department. Similarly, with Department of Public Works is staffed by the head of Public Works, and so on. Finance and other committees. That works fairly well. I mean, the city staff are responsible for working with the chair of each of these committees, of setting the agendas and making sure the mailings go out and minutes are taken, and in these days, Zoom invitations go out. Committees meet once a month, and then usually they will discuss whatever items on the agenda, and then after they look at it, they'll if they approve it, they'll send it on to the council for approval. I'm very jealous of New Haven, I have to say, having 10 staff members. We have basically a half a person. It's we want to have more. It's we have an assistant city clerk, so that person backs up our city clerk and also has been helping the council, but half a person doesn't do a lot. We're trying to expand that role, and actually I think I'm gonna ask others if they have any thoughts about job descriptions for that, because we are looking at expanding the role, because we think we need more staff to help us. We'll never get 10, it's too expensive, but if we can get 1, that'd be great. And I'm happy to take questions when you get to it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Leader, Mr. President, rather. And I'm sure Al Lucas will send you a job description if he's listening.
That'd be great.
I'm sure Al will be happy to send you a job description for that position. I will now give the chair back to the distinguished chair of our commission. Thank you very much, speakers.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to all of our speakers. So what we'll do now is, commissioners, if you want to use the raise hand function to let me know that you'd like to ask some questions, and I direct each of the commissioners to get through all of your questions to each of the individuals that you'd like to ask questions to, and then we'll move on to the next speaker, so on and so forth. And remember to refrain from trying to engage in debate or make comments here. We're asking questions of folks. We'll have plenty of time to debate at later meetings.
Mr. Chairman.
One moment, Commissioner Rubenstein, we will come to you first. I do have 2 quick questions, though, for Al Lucas before we move on. Al, so when it comes to the organizational structure for your staff, that's written in the charter, is it not? Al, I think you may be on mute. So I guess the question is it in ordinance or in the charter?
So the organizational structure is not in the charter. The office itself is listed in the charter. And then there's very broad description in the charter, as most charters should be. Has very broad description of the office, and then the organizational function has been worked out over the years by the board in consultation with staff.
Okay. And then my second question is, and this may not be the case, but are there members of the Board of Alders that serve on boards and commissions as liaisons? And if so, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Almost every board and commission in the city, except for those that have appeal authority related to the Board of Alders, like the Board of Zoning Appeals. So we have a separate Board of Zoning Appeals. We have a separate planning commission here, City Plan Commission. Those, although on the Planning Commission, we do have a aldermanic representative. So almost we have about 65, 66 boards and commissions in the city. At least, the vast majority of them have an aldermanic representative that is either voted on by the board or appointed by the president to be on that board or commission as a full member of that board or commission.
Okay, so that was my next question. They're full members, full voting rights.
Correct, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Rubenstein, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the guest panelists for an outstanding presentation of each and every one of their legislative situations. It was illuminating, very interesting. I have a couple questions for Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas, you're in New Haven. With respect to the legislative staff, which I find very intriguing, are there qualifications with respect to getting on the legislative services staff, or any educational qualifications as well as other qualifications? Is it full-time? And do they report, and do you report to the alders, or do you report to the mayor and the administration?
All right, so thank you for those questions. Yes, the staff is full-time. It's a professional staff. So they do have your basic qualifications, depending on which silo they're in. The qualifications are a little different, but basically you want people that can do the 3 R's, right? Read, write, and arithmetic, as we would say in the old days, because that's what you're going to be doing a lot of. And the further along, the better. So, people that have studied this stuff for a long time, that have public policy or government or political science or writing experience is great. We actually have had a lot of people that have come on that have been former journalists, interestingly enough, which is very helpful because they're able to really dig into the questioning part of things that are presented. They report specifically to me as their direct report, as the director of the office, and they work for the alders. So they work only for the legislative side. They do not work for the executive side. So the leadership of the board, here we have a personnel committee that's made up of the president, the majority leader, and the minority leader. And they are the ultimate personnel authority who tell me after someone applies which person they want to hire, and then we bring them on board, and then I supervise them day to day as it goes forward.
And I gather there's 10 of them to work with 30 alders. Is that true?
Yeah, there are 10 of us. There are 9, and then me who supervises the 9. So there are 10 of us in the office. That's correct.
And my last question is this. There are 30 alders. You have a total district situation. So you're not governed by the state at-large statute, which has defined minority representation. So of the 30 alders, can you tell me how many are not Democrats and are something else?
Yep, 0. We have, at the present moment, we have 30 Democrats. I've been here since 1990, and in that time, we have had, we've always had a majority of Democrats, but we've had Green Party members, we've had independents, we've had Republicans. At this time, we have 30 Democrats.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions from commissioners? If you want to use the raise hand function, I will recognize you. Councilman Gale.
Thank you. Had to figure all that out. A question for Waterbury, because it sounds like Waterbury was the of all the various municipalities, Waterbury is the one that changed most recently with the system. And I'm happy to get comments from other people about my question, but I want to start by directing it to Waterbury. One of the, I think it's an issue, maybe it's not, maybe we're in line with the rest of the state, but in Hartford, population of 120, I think 120, the latest census, it was 125,000. Council elections over the last 6, 8, 10 years, no more than about 9,000 people have voted. So you're talking, 9,000 people have elected a council in the city of Hartford of, over 120,000 people. And we're fully at large, 9 seats at large. I'm wondering from Waterbury, since you transitioned from fully at large to districts, whether you can say that improved voter participation. Were people more interested? Did you actually get higher turnout by going to district election?
So I think actually because of the change in going to a 4-year term for the mayor, which means that the off-year elections are even less interesting to people than they had been when the mayor ran every 2 years. In the off years, the voter turnout has actually fallen lower than it had been before, so that it did not drive it higher. Now, if we had, but in the years when the mayor is on the ticket, the numbers have trended about the same. They haven't gone up as far as the participation, but they've been the same. So I think had the mayor not gone to a 4-year term and stayed at a 2-year term, we'd probably see a steady, a steady flow throughout that time as well. One of the other problems that we have, and it's not major, but it does drive a little bit of the vote down because it drives people crazy as well, is as I mentioned, we don't have our alderman districts line up completely with our state house districts. So you have a funny situation where every other year people are voting, a certain number of people in Waterbury vote in different polling places. And that seems to confuse people, or a number of people who continually show up at the wrong polling place. And then I think we lose those votes as well, because once somebody gets sort of told you're at the wrong place, I don't think many of them actually end up going to the right place.
I'll just add, we had that same problem.
The confusion problem.
Right. The districts don't line up.
We try to send out postcards and other things, but people throw those things away these days, and if they just moved into the district and they voted in St. Paul's one day, and then they're told the next year they have to vote someplace else, it really confuses them.
So I'll just open it up to anybody else. Does anybody have any feeling that the district concept helps drive more people to the polls, or is everybody fairly neutral as district versus at large?
Hi, this is Vinny, Mr. Gale. I would say that we have 7 voting locations, 1 assigned for each ward, so people really like going to the same place. It's kind of the opposite effect from, I believe it is Norwalk and, sorry, I'm trying to look at the names, Waterbury, where if there's if the districts for the state votes are, if one ward has a piece of a state district, it actually, we open up this voting for that district still in their native ward location for local, and it's at a cost, it's at a higher cost. So for instance, there's an ability of 400 people that are in one of the state districts are part of a ward. Normally everybody from the ward goes to this school to vote, but when the state year will actually open up that same ward location just for maybe a couple hundred people to go vote at, and that requires additional staffing, another machine, and a significant cost. So aligning does seem to have its benefits, but I do agree with Paul that when people go to a voting location and it's not the correct one, it is pretty much the worst thing to happen to them that day.
Yeah.
I can just add in terms of voter turnout. I think I'm in district, and I think, when I go to, we have 3 polling locations in my district, and I can't really compare at-large voters and people who are there for the at-large versus in district, other than any sort of data-driven way. But I do get the sense when the in-district people are better known. I mean, as we talked about before, they're the ones who get the complaints, they're the ones who get the calls. So I think they're better known, and they're in a way somewhat draws for the others as well, because they're your neighbors and they know who you are.
Thank you. Hamden, got a comment there?
Yeah, I think another clue to figure out whether or not the district council representation drives voter turnout is you can tell when, in our situation where we have a hybrid, if a district is non-competitive. So if my district, or District 3 doesn't have a competitor within for that council person, they have a lower turnout. Even though their at-large slate is still going to look the same, their at-large votes that they're doing are still going to look the same. If the person in their district has no competitor, they're not driven to go vote. So it does drive down voter turnout when our district council people don't have someone to go against, or if there's no one who's going to go out and have a reason to vote, like, oh, I have to have Mr. Johnson be on I have to have Mr. Johnson win. So they're not really driven for it, even though they still have to vote for all their at-large people in a competitive way. So I would say, yeah, district folks drive up votes.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chair, I have another question for Waterbury, if I may.
Go ahead.
To hear anybody else's comments again. Could you go back over? I kind of missed. I think you indicated 2 people are elected by district, and how is that?
No, it's 3. So there's 3 people elected from each district, but no more than 2 can be from one party. So the Democrats run 2 candidates, the Republicans run 2 candidates. We have an independent party that runs 2 candidates. Voters go to the poll, they choose 2 candidates to vote for, and then the top 3 vote getters would be the winner. And so there would be, in our case, it's worked out. So in my district, for instance, the 2 Democrats and one of the 2 Republicans turned out to be the top vote getters. And so we are the 3 aldermen.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Last question. I'm just wondering if anybody has considered going to a nonpartisan election or ranked. Well, I don't know about ranked choice. I guess is probably not effective for council elections. I think ranked choice sounds like it works better if you're just electing a mayor. But has anybody have any thoughts about nonpartisan elections in Connecticut?
We just have never considered it.
We haven't either.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Vice Chairman DeJesus, we will go to you. And then Commissioner Rubenstein, if there are no further questions from other commissioners, we'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman DeJesus, you have the floor.
Thank you, good chair. Hey, so my question is based on, it looks like Hartford has one of the smaller councils, meaning by members. We have 9 members currently. For though I think the highest in the state, I think is up as high as 30 members or something like that. Can you guys tell me the challenges that present themselves when there's that many members? Can you give me lay of the land when it comes to that, because that would require us to probably, if we do a hyper system, to increase the number of council members. And that could be for anyone who can answer that question.
Well, we have 15 members, and we've had them both in the district and at large system. And I don't think there's any particular issues around that. It's a workable number, and I think you get an interesting perspective. You've got enough people to bring a lot of different perspectives to the table. So I don't see that it would be a huge problem to have. I don't know what 30 would be like, but 15 has been a very workable number for us.
Yeah,
Middletown has 12 members that we've had for quite some time. We did consider increasing our membership because in Middletown, with the strong mayor model, our mayor has a tie-breaking vote when there's a 6-6 vote, which has only happened 2 times in this past decade. So we were considering moving to 13, 14, or maybe even 15, but 12 works well for Middletown, which is an at-large setup, and we stayed with it.
Yeah, we're also 15, and I like the number. I think it's a good number. I've talked to some of my colleagues in Stamford. I get the sense that it's a little harder to get things done in Stamford. They also have a little different setup there in terms of the role of the mayor versus in Norwalk. But I think our number is a good number. It's a very workable number and easier to get things done.
Well, on behalf of the big one, right? We got 30 here in New Haven, and at least in the last 4 charter revisions, the people have continued and redistricting, they've continued to vote for it. So I can only tell you what the people of New Haven are saying, which is more representation they like. They know their elected official very intimately. So anything that you all can do to make sure that you give people more access, I think they'll be excited about. The number obviously is a local issue, but New Haven, we've been, like I said, we had 33 at our highest point and 27 at our lowest. So that's where we are now, at 30.
This is Vinny. We have 21 in Danbury, and I feel the number's been fine. I mean, at times people have talked about maybe looking to reduce to what would 15 be like, but we're a big growing city, so I think if we were trending the other way, maybe. But one challenge that comes up from both town committees, I feel that tends to be a challenge is putting slates together, because those are pretty big. 21 people just for the council, plus Board of Ed, plus zoning, et cetera. There's 40 plus people, on a slate, and that's a quite a big task every 2 years in Danbury when the elections come up. So that's I guess that's the only drawback, is trying to find a really engaged slate that's so large every 2 years. But the fact that there's 21 folks on the council is not an issue.
Any other questions, Mr. Vice Chair? Okay, I think he's indicating that he's all set. Okay, Commissioner Rubenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is addressed, and I just don't remember. I think it was 1 or 2 of the presenters had council people, but staff was appointed to work with them by the mayor and the administration. My question to those one or two is this: wouldn't it be smoother to have staff appointed by the council that works with the council? Because one problem could be that the mayor is of a different party than the majority of the council, and there could be friction. And secondly, it would seem to be more effective and more and smoother to actually have staff appointed by the council to whom they're going to work with. I'd like to hear from them, if I could. Thank you.
I can start with that. We actually had a lot of discussions about that. We happen to have a Democratic mayor, and we've been a Democratic council for at least 3-4 terms now. So it really hasn't been. We haven't had the issue of Republican versus Democrat or independent, whatever, on the committees. I think for us, it boils down to a resource issue. We don't have a staff. We have, as I mentioned before, half to one person. And in terms of hiring a staff, that would be, we don't have the resources to do that, and we'd have to do that or get the staff somehow. So we do, in a large degree, rely on the mayor's staff to give us the straight scoop, so to speak. But to date, it's worked for us. We do periodically look at that. We do talk about it, but it's worked for us, at least.
Yes, this is Vinny again. We also have that for the mayor. The mayor does appoint the legislative assistant. The charter revision happened years ago. That was in there, and there was impetus to change that, and it did not go through. It is a point of contention for some, and on both sides, both the Republicans and the Democrats. I would say, personally, myself as the president, I couldn't imagine managing somebody day to day and supervising them in their duties as a volunteer council person. And most of the council folks work full time, some part time. There's a handful that are retired. So I couldn't imagine the lift that would be, and ensuring that person is productive. Our city hall's open 4 days a week, so 4 days a week, and they do work 5 days sometimes. But the mayor's office does a lot in our form of government in Danbury. We don't have standing committees. We don't have a finance committee. Our council folks are not part of boards and commissions for the most part. They're all separate and independent. So it truly is a little different format than some that I've heard tonight, which I've enjoyed learning about. But it hasn't been an issue, in my opinion, in most of the council's opinion. From what I understand, it's not. It is contentious with some that's saying, hey, why doesn't the council get to approve its own legislative assistant? But I think in theory, it sounds better than the practical application of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and just so you all know, just to give you a little bit of insight from the other side, one of the reasons why we ended up putting our office in the charter is because the mayor has the ability to move city personnel around. And at a time when a mayor and the board were having issues with each other, at the time it was a he, decided to transfer staff out of our office over to the Parks Department. And so the board, when the charter was revised, changed that so that if there is an impetus to move the person that staffs or any people that are staffed for the legislative side, it needs to be approved by the personnel committee of the board. The mayor can't just go in and transfer somebody from one place to the other. Your colleagues in Bridgeport ran into the same issue where they had an office and the mayor gutted the financing for that office. So if you have the opportunity to protect however you have it set up, that legislative person, please make sure to look at a way to protect the council's staff person so that you will always have that person and that resource available to you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners this evening? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. We really appreciate it. It's been a tremendous learning experience. And there may be questions from commissioners coming to you all afterwards through myself or Steve. So be on the lookout for that. Hopefully there won't be too many. But we really appreciate your insights this evening and hope you have a great night. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you
great
for
seeing you
including
all.
us.
Thank
And
you.
Feel free to send notes, questions.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
So, Norwalk, I got everything you need coming your way.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna make it happen. And for everybody else, New Haven is open. Come on down this weekend. Spend some money in New Haven. All right.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
All right, so now we'll move back on to item number 5, comments from members of the Court of Common Council. Again, I'd like to recognize we have Councilwoman Rosado, Council President. We have our Majority Leader TJ Clark, who has joined us, and he can weigh in if he'd like. And we also have Councilwoman Surgeon as well. So Council President Rosado, I will hand the floor over to you for some comments on the council and boards and commissions and any other items that you'd like to address this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you everyone for being with us here this evening. So I apologize for not being in the prior meetings, but I did ask my assistant David to put a couple of notes together based on all the concerns and statements made by my council colleagues, which I pretty much agree with them. Some of them being, we would love to have more time to deliberate on the budget. Sometimes it's very stressful when you have 4 departments presenting one night. So allowing the budget process to have at least 2 more weeks would benefit the department heads, the administration, and also this council body, so that we could do our due diligence department by department and sometimes not feel rushed. The other issue that I wanted to bring up is professionalizing the office of the council body. Actually, I am very happy that we are headed that way. We now have 6 council members sharing an aide. And so this is a work in progress, but very happy that all of the council members have had the chance to talk about this and actually put it into play. And hopefully we're on a trial basis, right? To see how that works, of the sharing of the aides and responsibilities within the office. The other issue that they talked about was boards and commissions. So I strongly believe that council should have appointments to boards like the Civilian Police Review Board. But talking about the Civilian Police Review Board, through the ordinance, we're able, the council body is able to send 5 recommendations to Mayor Bronin, and he choose a couple of them and move them forward to this council body. So when it comes to appointments to boards and commissions, I personally have never had any kind of issues sending a recommendation after discussing with my colleagues to the mayor's office and seeing that appointment come through. So those are, my major concerns, and what I would like to see, that this charter commission have more conversation on and move forward. And again, the big topic that we had this evening, which was hybrid or at-large council members. Still don't want to comment on that. I'd like to see a report back from this charter commission after you visit all the NRZs, get feedback from the public. We're here to serve, right? We are elected by the residents of the city of Hartford, and would take into consideration what their thoughts are having representation from each district. Personally, taking a step aside from being council president and on council, I would love to have representation in my district where I could build that one-on-one relationship with that council person so that they could address my issues at hand at the council body. So I will leave it at that, take any questions or hear from my colleagues.
Thank you, Council President. Any questions for Council President Rosado? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Still got a lot of thoughts going through my mind, so I'm writing them down. So I hope in the future I can send my thoughts in writing to the commission. So if you don't mind, I would like to do that in the next, couple of weeks before you guys close out.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, and then Majority Leader Clark, rather, I know you're on the call. If you do have any comments or additional comments that you'd like to make, I will recognize you, and you're on video, so you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Excuse my attire. I was just trying to do some after-hour work here. But good evening, everyone. And I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to speak. Wasn't planning on speaking, but I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the distinguished panel that Attorney Megnet had convened. I thought it was very enlightening. And I just want to say that really, I think professionalizing the office is a way that we are heading. And I personally would like to see our office mirror the makeup of the New Haven Board of Elders. I think that it's critical. Not too sure if we want to look into expand it to 30 alders here in the city of Hartford. Maybe it might, take some strong consideration to expand the number beyond 9. I think I've always said, between 9 and 15. 15 probably might be stretching it, but at least that it can give more voice for consideration for individuals that want to elect people to represent them on council. But I do believe that, the boards and commissions, the council should have some say so. Excuse me, some appointment power, and I think it's really critical. Things evolve, mindsets evolve, processes do evolve, the world evolves. So I think that we should not just have things put in parameters where we are stuck and we're not able to adapt. So I just look forward to continuing to work with you all as we all go through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. All right, that concludes our program for this evening. At our next meeting, that'll be kind of our last meeting where we'll be hearing from a panel potentially. Attorney Mednick and I are working on that. And then we're going to move on to the next phase of our work here, which is really digging into the issues, debating things, and trying to come up with recommendations. With that, without objection, we will stand adjourned at 8:18 p.m. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Great day.
Thank you, everyone.